Okay, here we go.
Welcome to the worst of the best podcast. You wanted the best. Well, they didn't freaking make it! So here's what you get. From Canada, Ryan and Ruben.
All right, everyone, welcome to another uplifting and positive podcast, the worst of the best podcast. I'm your host, Ryan. With me again are a couple of guest hosts. They guest with me on the Robert De Niro episode, and they did a great job. They did such a great job that I thought I'd call them back sometime later, days and days and days later. They came back on the show, and they're here today, Craig and Doug, respectively, to talk about Mr. Jeffrey Epstein and his terrible demise and what really happened or may not have happened. So, Craig, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Craig Cohen from the Worst of the Best podcast.
Oh, wow. You fired my brother from the show.
I've done more episodes of Worst of the Best now than I've done of Slycast in the last year.
All right. Doug.
Yeah, my name's Doug Greenberg of the Rocky Minute and the Sylvester Stallone Podcast Network.
Yes, found
featuring
on YouTube.
This holy trinity of Stallone podcasters.
Yeah, so if you want to check that out, me, Doug, and Craig, or Craig, Doug, and I, we do a podcast called the Stallone Podcast Network. It's where we conglomerate our hosting superpowers onto a YouTube channel, but those YouTube videos or audios are released on our respective podcasts that we host. So it's just, basically, these guys are just great. They're great to podcast with. I could do any topic, anytime with these guys. One of the biggest news stories at the end of this year, guys, I would have to say would be the death of Jeffrey Epstein. He was a pimp who supplied child prostitutes to the wealthy elite, and he got caught for doing that. He knew things that could bring some powerful people in his circle down as well. He was tied to princes, presidents, multiple billionaires. He'd been spotted at parties with some of the biggest names imaginable. So if he shared everything he knew, there's no telling how many people he could have taken down with him, because he was already in jail. And when you're kind of at that point of your life, if I'm going down, everyone's going down with me. But then suddenly, lo and behold, surprise, surprise, he died in jail. Apparently, guys, he was under constant watch, maximum security prison, and Jeffrey Epstein's life ended at what officially has been called a suicide. And somehow nobody saw this happen. So at a glance, it sounds a little suspicious. And when you look into the details, which we're going to today, it just gets worse. This is one of those moments, and I'm not a quote-unquote conspiracy theorist. I don't like that term, but to say that we are told the truth by the media and by those in power at all times and all places is an absolute. If you believe that, then you're a moron.
Mm-hmm. If anybody ever believes that the most powerful people don't run society, you are out of your mind. They can buy anything. They can buy news stories. They can make you believe anything you want just by influencing the information that's being put out there. And this is probably, obviously the most recent and one of the most egregious cases, I think.
It's gone to the point now, guys, where somebody like Epstein, quote unquote, commits suicide in prison, and the average Joe Q public knows that it's a joke, that the official story is such a joke that it's become a meme, a popular meme. Like people will be talking about, hey, did you hear that they're cutting down rainforests by this many times a minute and killing species everywhere, and Epstein didn't hang himself. It's become a meme of itself where it's buried in inconsequential type stuff, and all of a sudden you see it and we laugh and joke, but it has become a joke. Our own media we're expected to believe this has happened. We'll go into now 10 clues or facts, you could say, that are true, that kind of indicate that he did not commit suicide, that maybe he was in fact murdered. The criteria, after we read our 10 clues to his murder, vice his suicide, we'll pick the worst, meaning the one of the 10 clues that's the least likely to not make it a murder.
The one that's most likely to point towards suicide?
Yes.
Or that has the least evidence to prove that it's murder? Yeah, the one that has the least evidence to prove that it's murder.
Okay.
The one that has the least evidence to prove that it's murder.
So I'll start with number 10. These are all fascinating, by the way, and I hope our listeners are just as fascinated by me, because it only takes at least one of these to indicate that he didn't hang himself.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So again, for the record, the official report is that he hung himself, that he committed suicide. Okay. So on July 23rd, Epstein was found in a cell. He was unresponsive with injuries around his neck. So according to the official report again, he tried to hang himself, but this attempted suicide didn't work. We have this happen almost 2 weeks before his official quote-unquote suicide. So just like on August 10th, he was unconscious, he was badly wounded, and just like they would on August 10th, his guards claimed that he tried to kill himself. The only difference was that on July 23rd, Epstein survived, so he could tell his own side of the story. Epstein denied that he ever attempted suicide. Instead, he claimed that he had been beaten halfway to death by his cellmate, a former police officer named Nicholas
Tartaglione.
Thank you. His defense attorney, David Scone, still insists it was not a suicide attempt. He was afraid he would face consequences if he implicated anyone, the lawyer said, so he kept his mouth shut, and he told investigators he couldn't remember what happened. There was a cellmate who was a former police officer, of all people, in his cell who kicked the tar out of him.
I know this is kind of a running joke, but Doug, you're a police officer, right?
Is that right, Doug?
That is correct.
Okay.
You got a high-profile prisoner like this. I would think that they, especially if he has any kind of information regarding things that they haven't yet cleared out yet, I would think that they would sequester him and keep him away from everybody,
Right.
to prevent any kind of funny business. So him having a cellmate did surprise me a little bit.
Sure. That's just number 10. All right, who's got number 9?
According to the list, I do.
Okay.
His cellmate Tartaglione was never questioned. The former police officer we were talking about, prison officials claim that Tartaglione was cleared of any wrongdoing in a July 23rd incident through an internal investigation. But if they did conduct an investigation, it could have been a particularly thorough one, because Tartaglione said himself that he has not been questioned by any law enforcement official since July 23rd. He denies ever having heard Epstein. He said that he found Epstein lying in a fetal position and went to help him. He says these accusations were cooked up by guards who were tired of him complaining about the conditions of the prison. Tartaglione has received that if he conveys information about the facility or about Epstein's recent suicide, there would be a price to pay, his lawyer claims. So this guy was cleared without ever having been interviewed.
Is that legit handling of...
No, 0% of the time.
They got a picture of him here with his police dog. You see that?
Yeah. I don't know anything about this guy, this Tartaglione guy.
Yeah, why was he in prison? Do we know? Like, there's so much stuff on this whole thing. It would take... I'm sure this podcast have been created just to cover this whole story. These are just 10 clues that he was murdered and didn't commit suicide. So there's just so much craziness here. These are all facts. These are undisputable facts. Okay? Mm-hmm. He did get beaten up, and the guy that beat him up was an ex-police officer. Somebody who knew how to take care of,
Right. Right.
All right, you got the next one there, Craig?
Yes, I do. Number 8, Epstein was taken off of suicide watch.
Makes sense.
Epstein was taken off of suicide watch just 12 days before his death. He was put on watch in late July, most likely on July 23rd, after he was found injured in what guards claimed was an attempted suicide. And if he'd stayed on suicide watch, there's almost no chance he would have died. Prisoners on suicide watch are put under constant observation. They're kept in a special cell that gives the staff an unobstructed view of every prisoner does, and they're given daily evaluations by psychologists. Whether he was suicidal or not, many experts agree that keeping Epstein under constant watch was just a good precaution. I would have a staff member sitting there or have a camera on him 24/7 while he was in my custody, one former warden told NBC, purely to cover my butt.
Mm-hmm.
Why was he taken off suicide watch?
He wouldn't be unless the psychiatrist felt that he wasn't a risk anymore, because they have a lot to lose. You take somebody off a suicide watch and they kill themselves, they're liable.
Well, the psychiatrist says that it wasn't warranted, that he was very upbeat. Very upbeat. Who could be upbeat in prison? This is great.
This is great.
I'm telling you right now, Doug and Craig, if you ever throw me in prison, I wouldn't last in prison. It scares the crap out of me.
Suicide watch?
Because it scares the crap out of me. Put me in isolation at the very least. But I don't want to interact with anybody. Nobody. Ever.
Mm-hmm.
Almost sounds nice.
Yeah, I know, right?
Are prisons really that bad in Canada?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, you don't want to be in prison. I mean, again, like everything, there's like hardened criminals and, people, cheating on their taxes criminals. But there's certain demographics I wouldn't want to be mixed up with. Yeah.
Same everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. People are not nice. People that commit violent crimes, I don't want to be in jail with them. Yeah, number 7. Is that me?
Yep.
Day before his death, his cellmate was transferred out. Is that the same guy that beat him up?
It doesn't say in the blurb, but I
probably
would
not.
think so.
It's probably just saying he had a cellmate, one that didn't beat him up, I guess. But of course, now, now
maybe not, because that first beating was July 23rd, and this is
before.
talking about August 9th.
Right.
So yeah.
So he had another cellmate, but again, this points toward we don't have to kill the cellmate. We just have to kill Epstein. So we can't have any witnesses because you don't want to have to kill 2 people dead in the cell is obvious. You can only have 1 dead cell person, right? Mm-hmm. So it was also the day a federal court released thousands of pages of sealed records on Epstein's case. The names of men accused of being Epstein's clients were exposed, and some of those names were of very powerful men. Quote, a lot of important people are going to have a really bad weekend, one article quipped. Even though Epstein was no longer on suicide watch, he was supposed to be under constant surveillance. But hours before his suicide, and right after the court documents were released, his cellmate was suddenly transferred, and no one was assigned to replace him. A man who was on suicide watch just days ago was now left completely alone, and no explanation for the transfer has ever been given. Well, we have the explanation. I just told you. Mm-hmm. We can't have a witness of the murder.
As if this story isn't crazy enough, why would you be so obvious to kill him the day after you moved his cellmate? Like, just give it a couple weeks, right?
A good time to have murdered him would have been after the failed police officer attempt.
Yeah.
And just give it like 10 days in between the two. Yeah, I don't.
If you want to get really tinfoily hat, why not just kill him after that attack and say that attack is what killed him, and then frame Tartaglione as well?
Or put in a cellmate who's really just like a deep cover operative who's playing a cellmate and says, yeah, I was there when he hung himself. I was sleeping, but I woke up and he was hanging.
You could give him a code name. Let's say Portos.
Whoa, deep cut. Deep cut.
All right. We moving on. Number 6.
Yeah.
Epstein was left unobserved for hours. Epstein wasn't supposed to be left alone, and his guards knew it. There were orders to keep camera surveillance on him at all times, to check on him every 30 minutes, and never to leave him alone in his cell for even a second. But on the night he died, every single one of those rules were broken. Not only had his cellmate been transferred out like we spoke about before, the prison was short-staffed. 10 of the 18 people who were supposed to be on duty had shown up, and the 2 men in charge of monitoring him were both working overtime. So allegedly, both of these guards that were supposed to be monitoring Epstein fell asleep and didn't bother checking on him for a full 3 hours, and they falsified the logs to claim they had been doing their duty. First of all, there's no way that these guards still have their jobs and may or may not have been brought up on charges for, some kind of misconduct. Official misconduct for not only failing to do their duty by checking on him every 30 minutes, which here in New Jersey, if a prisoner is on suicide watch, I think their checks are every 10 or 15 minutes.
Right.
Rather than the regular 30. They fell asleep on duty, left a suicidal person alone for 3 hours, and falsified their logs to say that they have been checking on him. Nothing about that is okay. Nothing.
Well, also 8 people calling out.
Yeah.
Yeah, 8 people call.
It's weird. It's almost like Epstein knew the perfect time to hang himself.
Right. Right. Like, they're falling asleep. Yeah. It's time.
He timed it perfectly. He knew exactly when everything would fall apart, so he could do this quietly and peacefully without anyone interrupting him. How convenient. How knowledgeable.
Or seeing it, because the cameras were... both cameras had malfunctioned.
Right. Man. I'm glad I got to read that one, because I was angry. Just every sentence that went by, I'm like, this is bullcrap. This is bullcrap. Like, these guys are prison guards.
All right, Craig, you got number 5.
Yep. Epstein's suicide may have been physically impossible. According to the official report, Epstein was found dead in his cell on August 10th at 6:30 a.m. The 6-foot-tall man had allegedly fastened a noose out of a bedsheet, tied it to his bed frame, and knelt down to hang himself. No way, an ex-inmate of the facility told the New York Post nearly as soon as the story broke. Suicide at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, the ex-inmate claims, is effectively impossible. Could he have done it from the bed? No, sir. There's a steel frame, but you can't move it. There's no light fixture. There's no bars. They don't give you enough in there that could successfully create an instrument of death. The statistics back up the claim. In the past 21 years, the prison has only seen one other successful suicide. At least one other former inmate has voiced agreement. It's next to impossible to kill oneself in jail.
Yeah, that's a pretty standard in today's modern day prisons, and I think Doug could probably speak to this, to kind of create a prison where, yeah, it's just hard to do. Basically enough rope to hang yourself, enough leg room to swing around. Like, where is he hanging himself from if there's nothing to throw the sheet around?
They don't have your typical bed frames in jails anymore. They have bed frames that are secured, not even frames, because they're just secured to the wall where there's only rounded edges. There's no posts or anything that you can tie off to.
Right.
That includes the sink. The cell doors have no bars. They're just windows and steel, because they make it virtually impossible for you to tie off to anything to hang yourself. You don't need much. You can tie yourself off to something low enough and hang yourself that way. You know, you don't have to be dangling from the ceiling.
Right.
They don't even facilitate enough that much for anybody to hang themselves.
Oh, man.
Well, the bed frame would have to be pretty high in order to create the angle needed to cut off circulation or break your neck. I mean,
it's not totally necessary. You only need a couple of feet of clearance, and you just got to, take all your weight.
Just lean into it.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
This one's interesting. I think it's true. I don't think it's made up. According to this, number 4, Epstein's death was reported on a 4chan before it was in the news. So at 8:16 a.m., just a little over an hour after Epstein was found dead in his cell, the first post about his death broke out into the world with the title, Jeffrey Epstein Dead. Don't ask me how I know, the message said, but Epstein died an hour ago from hanging, cardiac arrest. It was posted on 4chan 38 minutes before the first report hit the news. The poster appeared to be a first responder, as the post was full of information about how they tried to resuscitate him. Quote, was called out as a cardiac arrest at the Manhattan Federal Detention Facility, one post said. Worked, what do you call that word again?
Asystole?
Worked asystole. Yeah, it's like working on the heart for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Epstein was in the hospital for 20 minutes, the post claims, before his death was called. The FDNY has denied that the post could have come from one of their staff, saying the account doesn't match our medical records. But whether the details are right or not, somehow this person knew about his death before the press. Let's just say I know, said the only explanation the post provides. Don't need a glowy federal officer coming to my crib. This is the thing, man. There's people inside, right? So they had somebody go onto 4chan. He was dead when they made this post, yes, but that's just it. The guy wanted to get the information out there fast and furious right away. Like, the person who was in the know, it was probably some account created just to do this.
Yeah, well, people want to be the first one, want to be the one to get the word out. And I believe that's what this guy did. It's not right, and it's not legal to go posting on the internet about details about a medical case or really anything that's going on. But people do it. Cops do it. Firemen do it. EMTs do it on like Facebook and stuff. They'll post a picture of a burning house just to get likes or get the conversation started. I think it's terrible that people do that.
Craig got number 3? Or sorry, Doug's got 3.
I think I do.
No, Doug's got 3, Craig's got 2, and then Doug's got 1.
Yeah, according to the list. Stick to your duties, damn it.
I don't like to prep.
Yeah, we know.
Number 3, his sex ring was successfully covered up years earlier. ABC News anchor Amy Robach, in a leaked video that came out earlier this month, bitterly complained, "I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Epstein accuser Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air." She wasn't exaggerating. Back in 2015, Robach had a story that would have exposed Epstein's prostitution ring. She had all the major details, even his connection to Prince Andrew and Bill Clinton, but somehow the story never made the news. She released a statement saying that the story wasn't censored and that it simply didn't offer enough evidence to meet ABC's editorial standards. But her own unedited statements in the leaked video tell a very different story, where she says that she was threatened by the UK's royal family, threatened to cut off their ability to cover their family if Prince Andrew's secrets came out. And another network has since corroborated that in 2015, Epstein's lawyers contacted them and asked them to keep the story from reaching the news.
That's true. That video, go Google that. Again, that her name was Amy Robach, Robach. It's on YouTube, where she's just cutting the rug with one of the producers or somebody behind the camera between commercials. And she was visibly frustrated by the fact that she had the story on Epstein 3 or 4 years ago, but she was blackballed and blocked by higher powers from revealing what Epstein was doing.
So are they saying that the UK's royal family had something to do with his murder?
I think the idea here is just, so the headline again is that his sex ring has been consistently and successfully covered up for years. This points to evidence towards who may have killed him. I don't know, but again, another indication that it wasn't suicide. The people in very powerful positions, whether it's in royal government or otherwise, don't want to be implicated if he kills himself, or quote unquote, they're not going to wait for him to kill himself. They want him dead.
Right. And again, money talks.
Right. Oh, yeah, man.
Number 2. Epstein had injuries on his wrists and arms. It was Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark, who collected his body. But when he found him, he had far more than just injuries to his neck. There were wounds on his wrists. Mark's description is backed up by the autopsy. When he died, the autopsy says he had contusions on both of his wrists, an abrasion on his left forearm, and deep muscle hemorrhaging on his left deltoid. Those are unexplained, Mark Epstein says. Was he handcuffed and struggled? Was someone holding his wrists? Mark says that he's requested the details from his brother's file multiple times and has asked the investigators to explain how they ruled the possibility that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered. But months later, he has yet to receive a response. I was told someone was looking into it.
Now, these kind of injuries can happen from any kind of struggle. Maybe you had a fight with another inmate. If it was somebody else involved, there would have been some kind of report filled out, right? If you had a fight with another inmate, I would think.
Yeah, and I remember when this autopsy report did come out, it's actually made the news as such that the autopsy report indicated that it was not a suicide. Or again, it was not consistent with the evidence of just a suicide at the very least. Maybe he had a struggle, then committed suicide? Sure.
Right.
Sure.
That is going to be more evident with this last fact, Ryan, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's yours.
No, you.
All right. Experts say his wounds are more
follow
consistent.
the list, Doug. Follow the list. You're not.
Sorry. Experts say his wounds are more consistent with murder.
There you go.
Dr. Michael Baden, who sat in on the autopsy, initially refused to talk to the press about what he's seen. He was under a gag order, he told them, and it wouldn't be right for him to comment. But when the news started reporting that his death was being ruled a suicide, he stopped holding it in. He told the press that from what he'd seen, his injuries were more consistent with murder. He points to fractures on his neck, which he said are extremely unusual in suicidal hangings. Indeed, the medical researchers say that these types of fractures are about twice as common in homicides as suicides. According to one study, they can occur in about 25% of suicides. It says a drop of about 5 to 9 feet is required for these type of injuries. Right. And like I said before, there's no room to do that in a cell. You're not fracturing your neck in your regular jail hanging. You're just cutting off your air and kind of suffocating.
Right. It's evidence of a homicide. Somebody wrung his neck.
And this is coming from a medical examiner. Like, that's pretty much the definitive word, the authority on the cause of death. Yeah. And he's saying it's a murder. These injuries are consistent with murder. However, it's being ruled a suicide. And
here's the thing: nobody's going to investigate. Who's going to investigate who?
Well, that's the thing, yeah.
Well, and also when you look at somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, I mean, I'm sure you'd find many people that would be willing to defend him. And, sadly, when somebody dies and they've done horrible things, people just say, oh, well, they deserve to be dead anyway. So they'll just dismiss all of the chicanery, surrounding the circumstances that led to their death.
Yeah.
This guy, by all rights, was a piece of garbage and deserves to be dead. The cover-ups and the people getting away with it, it's very disturbing that level of cover-up can occur.
He was a pimp for child prostitution, end of the story. No one's debating that. And the debate is, well, who was involved with him? Names like, Prince Andrews, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump have been thrown around, mingling with him at one point or another. Whether they participated in his wares or not, I guess that hasn't been proven. And that was the fear, and now he's dead, and we'll never know.
And it's the faceless victims of these prostitutes, the ones that suffer as a result of this.
Yep. Well, on that merry, jolly... Which piece of evidence that points towards a murder would be the least powerful or least reason to believe it might be murder. Maybe it could have been suicide.
I'm going to say number 4, which was the 4chan report. Because either way, somebody having advanced knowledge or being close to the situation reporting that he's dead, it doesn't really indicate that it was a suicide or a murder. It just indicates that they were close to the situation.
I hear what you're saying, but I think my argument against that, Craig, the fact that they're trying to get ahead of the news, getting this out there before the news, is they want to make sure that the first message that gets out there from an authoritative medical source, which the FDNY is saying that wasn't us, is saying, oh yeah, we tried to resuscitate him, meaning nobody murdered him, he hung himself, so we're trying to save him, because the reality is somebody did murder him. So they're saying, no, it was a suicide. Because look, I'm a medical responder, and I'm telling you, we tried to resuscitate him from a suicide. So I think they're trying to lead the story before it became a story. If that's my understanding of number 4, I could be wrong.
But also at the same time, Ryan, you could have a situation where he was held in such little regard that if he did, attempt suicide, they might say, oh, just let him die. Who cares?
Yeah, how far are they going to really resuscitate him? I view it the same way that Craig did. That was my pick, too, for least likely to point towards murder. I mean, if you take it at face value, it just looks like a guy working on scene that wanted to get the word out there, that wanted to be the first one to make the report, that wanted to become famous as the first guy to report that Epstein was dead. I took it at face value. I guess Craig did, too. I mean, if you're saying, Ryan, that it was the powers that be that wanted to put the story out, I'm
leaning towards that. I might be a little tinfoil hatty on that. That's how I read it. That's how I read of what's happening there.
It could be, but I'm thinking along Craig's line of thinking too, and that's my choice.
I'm almost there. I'm with you guys. I guess I feel strongly that I think it was a conspiracy to get the word out first. Like it was a plant by the powers that be. So I guess I'm leaning towards that being evidence that he was murdered. I'm believing what I'm reading. I don't know why, but that's just what I'm doing. So I kind of lean towards the fact that his earlier, 4 or 5 years earlier, this news piece did have a story on his sex ring. It doesn't indicate, though an interesting piece of evidence, though an interesting piece of the media or the powers that be that control the media, which we know they do, stopping the story from coming out 4 or 5 years ago about him having a ring, having names involved in the ring. The only thing that kind of happened here is it indicates that people in power, which is no big surprise, can stop a news story. The same way they can create one. Because you could argue, well, yeah, he committed suicide because he was under the gun. He's going to jail for a long time, so he committed suicide. So this news story, it doesn't help or not help the fact that he was murdered or committed suicide. It's indifferent to that. I think it, though an interesting piece of evidence, I don't think it points to murder or suicide one way or the other.
Yeah, I can't really speak to it. That's fair. That's a fair assessment.
Yeah, it just shows that people that are in power can stop a news from spreading. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. That was, anyone feel good about themselves right now, or how do we feel?
Did you do your pick, Ryan? Did you share your pick for the worst?
That was number 3, sorry. Just because on the surface, there's no evidence that makes it a murder or suicide. It can fit both equally, so it's the least one towards what's going on here. It's just showing the powers that be have said, hey, we can stop the news from happening, which, yeah, I believe it. But it doesn't really say whether or not what Epstein's motives were the night he died, or Mm-hmm. So, though an interesting piece of news, I don't think it indicates murder or suicide.
Mm-hmm.
So, guys, that was depressing.
I'm gonna go need a shower after this.
Yeah, the guy was a creep, and I hope whatever hell might be out there, I hope he enjoys it, because like Doug had said, the nameless and faceless victims, it just breaks my heart. There are real people here who are being... I don't even know how. Doug, you might know more than I do about how these children are found. I don't. Are they Americans? Are they other world? Are they other country? I mean, are they?
I think it's a little bit of everything. It's more likely that immigrants will get exploited.
Right.
Yeah, they come from everywhere, though.
Oh man, it just breaks my heart. Let's raise our hats and kudos to those law enforcement officials and who do go out of their way to fight this stuff. There's detachments in every force where there's child safety officers, I don't know what they're called everywhere, but who go out and have to see this terrible part of life to convict these people. So thanks to them for their service and their sacrifice mentally to take care of this stuff. Ugh.
Yeah.
Cheers. Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, Merry Christmas to you guys. May all your dreams come true. And with that, remember, in front of every silver lining, there's a cloud. We're there to help you find it. And Epstein didn't hang himself.
That was a heavy one.
That was heavy. Oh,
This was fun, man.
Yeah,
totally different than what we're used to.
I love doing this one too with my brother because it's like, it's just kind of nice to talk about different topics. Just talk about different things. And if you guys want, I'd love to have you guest host on the next one.
Anytime you want, man.
Yeah, anytime, man.
It might happen more times than not because Ruben, like I was saying, that he works like 6 days a week. And he runs a business, and of course he's got kids. And so when his night is available, it's like 7:30 when he's ready to record, which we usually did back when I lived on the West Coast. But that's 10:30 at night for me, so it just gets hard to correlate times together. So
it's your show with him. If he's okay with it, I feel bad like we're stepping on his toes.
No, he doesn't want the show to stop just because he can't record. So
all right,
guys. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks again. Okay.
All right,
cool. Take care, guys. Have a good one.
You too.
Adios.
Bye-bye.